Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I want to thank you all for coming to this month's Java with Joe. This is probably up there with one of our biggest crowds we've ever had, so thank you to you all. And this is a special one as it's our first one being recorded that will go up on our YouTube channel. So that is the plan from here on out. So in case you can't make one in the future, it'll be ready for you. This month we have our city historian Larry Barnes with us today, and he will be talking about his travels to the 8 other Batavias. We had this long discussion of going back and forth how many there actually were, because we kept feeling like we were missing one, but we got it set finally. So he's going to talk about our sister cities in one way, even though they might not admit it, but and we might not admit it either. But Larry, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you. I have to pardon myself if you have a little bit of difficulty understanding me. I'm 83 this year, and I'm dying in pieces, and my teeth were the first to go. I have dental replacements, and I have a little bit of difficulty talking around them sometimes, so you may have to listen to that extra carefully. Some of you may wonder, why does Batavia have an historian? You ever wondered that?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Because it's the state law. In New York State, in 1918, as World War I came to an end, someone thought it was a good idea for all the communities in New York to have an historian. And so the state legislature at that time passed a law requiring every community to have one. And so since 1919, we've had a city historian. The first was a man by the name of William Kuhn, who had a very enviable record, although I don't want to completely emulate it. He served in office from 1919 until 1953 when he died. So what I don't want to do is to die in office.
Or at all.
Or, well, maybe, I'm not so sure if I want to stick around forever. Some of you also may wonder, well, how do you get to be a historian? Some of you are former students of mine. You know that I didn't teach history. I taught psychology at Jensen Community College. You get to be a historian by being appointed by either the mayor of the community, if there is one, or by the manager, if there is one. So I'm appointed to 4-year terms by the city manager, and those terms are 4 years in length. So I'm just into the 2nd year of my most recent term. I was a city historian beginning in 2008. So how many of you have bucket lists? Can I see a show of hands?
What?
Bucket list? You can't kick one until after the when I became a city historian, I added a desire to my bucket list, which was to locate and visit every Batavia in the country. And at the time, I had no idea how many there were. I'd only been to one. My wife and I traveled quite a lot, and many, many years ago, we were on a trip out to the west, and I got a terrible toothache. And we stopped in this place called Batavia, Illinois. Went to a dentist there, and he took care of the problem. And that was my first knowledge of Batavia, Illinois. We'll be talking a little bit about Batavia, Illinois in a few minutes. So let's begin with the trip down memory lane to the other Batavias. And as Ryan has said, there are 8 other Batavias that currently exist. However, there was one Batavia that existed before any of the current ones. It was located in Greene County. It dates back to 1768. It was on the Batavia Kill in Greene County. Now, not everybody here may be familiar with the term kill. It is a Dutch word that refers to a stream. So there's a stream passing through Greene County, and it was called the Batavia Kill. And as a consequence, when the community began to form on that stream, they decided to call it Batavia. So that's the first Batavia that we know about. It existed for several years. It became absorbed into a larger community down the road. Wyndham is the name of that community. My wife's sitting over here, and she's going to correct me when I make mistakes. Or or if I'm trying to tell some secrets about the family, she would say. So, in any event, this first Batavia went out of existence in 1803. There was a post office there from 1801 to 1803 called the Batavia Post Office. And when our post office was created in 1802, and the general store operated by James Brisbane. That's right. Very good. My wife rehearses my talks for me. And as you can imagine, there was a problem with delivering mail that was addressed to Batavia in New York State, because did that mean Batavia on Batavia Kill, or did that mean the Batavia on our river here? And so the problem was eventually solved by closing of the office in Greene County. All right, so that's a place I have not visited because it doesn't exist anymore. But I thought we ought to know about it because it is the first Batavia in the country. So that brings us to us, which we will be getting to as part of the series here. These are all of the states in New York where there's a Batavia. So in all of the communities in the country where there is a Batavia. So ours, of course, one of them, and we are the oldest. Then there's one in Ohio. I've moved across the country, so it's a geographical progression from east to west here. So there's one in Ohio, there's one in Michigan, there's one in Illinois, there's one in Wisconsin, one in Iowa, one in Arkansas, one in Montana, one in California. Now, if you are well acquainted with your histories, I'll bet everybody here is, you know that the history of our country in terms of settlement by Europeans was beginning on the East Coast and then moving west, especially to the West Coast. And you'll notice this progression here is from the East Coast to the West Coast, and the years in which they were established reflect that general progression. So the earliest is us, and the most recent is here at the bottom of the list in California, or possibly one in Montana, because I have a question there you will see eventually. So Batavia, I don't need to say very much about because here we are, and if you look around, you know what's here. Except to note that we were founded in 1801. Some people would say 1802, so we can have a little argument about that. It's either 1801 or 1802. And the current population, which is not our highest was back in the 1960s, the current population is between 15 and 16,000. So enough about that. Let's move ahead to Batavia, Ohio. Batavia, Ohio was founded in 1814. Current population is 1,500. It's a suburb of Cincinnati, on the east side of Cincinnati. It's governed by a mayor, village administrator, 6-member village council, and the person who created it or founded it, a man by the name of George Eli. He laid it out along with a couple of his buddies in 1814 and gave it its name. Now the question is, how did it get its name of Batavia? And the local people don't know. One of the things that surprised me is I've gone on from one community to another. I always look up the local historian, if there is one, or the librarian, or somebody who ought to know. I'll say, how did you get your name? In many cases, they don't know, and I've tried to figure it out myself. And here's an example of that. We know that George Eli lived in Philadelphia, or opposite Philadelphia, New Jersey, back in the early 1800s, before he moved to the area of Ohio where Batavia, Ohio is located. And that was a home that would have been right across from where Joseph Ellicott lived, and other people who were associated with the land company after which this building is named. So he probably knew about Batavia and liked the name, maybe. And so when they were looking for a name for this new community in Ohio, he said, I've got a great idea, let's call it Batavia. So there you are. That's the best explanation anybody can give you about where that name came from. Now, I've made pictures of places that I've visited along with my wife, and I'm going to give you a sample of some of the things in the various locations. So here's the Claremont County Convention and Visitors Bureau, which probably was somebody's home at one time and then it was converted. This is a typical older building in Batavia, Ohio. It almost has some Dutch elements in its appearance too, that roof line. Though there were no Dutch around then, so I don't know how that happened to be. And they don't either. I think it's a very attractive older building. A lot of communities have kept their older buildings in great shape, and this community is one of those. This is the Civic Center. The mayor and his cohorts hold office here. There's the fire station and the police department as well. One of the things I try to do is to meet with local officials. I'm kind of a roving ambassador from Batavia, New York, so I'll walk in and I'll say, hi, I'm from Batavia, New York. How do you do? We kept talking, and they invited me. They were there to come to their evening meeting, so I met the members of the board of directors of the city council and the village administrator and others. And one of those individuals became a friend of ours, was on Facebook and communicates with us on a regular basis, which has been kind of nice. This was incorporated into a village in 1842, in case you're curious about that. Here's another really nice home. Another nice home. This place is just filled with structures like these. And oftentimes I make a point of visiting the cemetery, sit on a tombstone and listen for any stories that might be coming out of the ground about their past. This is their cemetery, Batavia Union Cemetery. It says in fine print that you probably can't read. The sign was donated by the Hammond family, whoever they were. All right, so let's move ahead. We're going to go to Batavia, Michigan. It was founded in 1835. Its current population is under 1,500. It's an unincorporated hamlet in the Batavia Township. And it's kind of akin to what you find here in Genesee County with places like Byron. Byron is not incorporated. The hamlet isn't. But everybody who refers to living in Byron probably referring to the hamlet. And this is an example of that. There's no incorporated community, but there is a place that people refer to as Batavia as part of the township. It's one of these communities which has gone downhill over the years. At one time, there were many establishments in the community. There were, among other things, according to their records, 2 stores, a tavern, a blacksmith shop, a wagon shop, and a post office. And all those things are now gone. And this is it. This is one of the 3 or 4 streets that make up this community. And
wow.
Even the railroad no longer functions, as you can tell by the weeds here. And this was probably one of the 2 stores that existed at one time. and one of the churches that still functions. And of course the cemetery. I always have to try to visit the cemetery if I can. So that's Batavia, Wisconsin. Mission, rather. Sorry. Thank you for keeping track of what I'm doing there. I wonder, you know, when I first started teaching, it was back when the college was located on West Main in Downtown County Building 2. It used to be a value department store, and then it was Value Tech. I had classes that began at 7:30 in the morning, and it's hard for me to imagine now getting up and teaching the class at 7:30. I'm having trouble doing a presentation at 9 o'clock in the morning. So anyway, we'll move ahead to the next community. After we get out of where we are. Batavia, Illinois. It was founded in 1833, and apparently it was referred to as head of the woods. Head of the woods, meaning the forest, I think. A very rural area at the time. Then it was renamed in 1841, and I'll refer to that process in a moment. And its population is now 26,100 people. It's the largest of the Batavias that currently exist. So it's about almost twice the size of our community, and we're the second largest. Now, where did it get its name? That they know. There was a man by the name of Isaac Wilson, who was a judge, and he once lived in West Middlebury in Wyoming County. And those of you who know the history of this area know that Wyoming County was once part of Genesee County, and then it split off sometime in the middle of the 1800s. Well, he was from West Middlebury, and he moved out to beyond the frontier, which meant, in this case, being in Illinois, and he became a postmaster. Now, I've discovered that postmasters are people for whom the power oftentimes goes to their head, evidently. More than once I discovered they would say, okay, the name of the community is now going to be what I tell you it's going to be. And so he said to these people living there in the head of the woods, I'm postmaster, we are now Batavia, Illinois. And that stuck, so that's where that came from. It's a very wealthy community. Very wealthy community. The median household income is over $100,000 a year. Wow. And that's at least twice what our median household income is here. And the median value of owner-occupied houses is over $300,000, which doesn't sound like very much if you're from California or from around southern Florida. But here, I think the median household income owner-occupied houses is closer to $50,000 to $60,000. So it's a very wealthy community. One of the reasons for that is that it is the location of the Fermi National Accelerator Lab, where they do atomic research. And so they have a lot of people who are highly educated and highly well-paid people living in the community. It was incorporated into a city in 1872. So here are some pictures. There's a river that flows through Batavia, Illinois. It's called the Fox River. It's a beautiful river, and they have done a tremendous job of using the river as a focal point for their activities. And they've built it up in a manner that makes it park-like for a good bit of its length. So here you see a nice walkway alongside of the Fox River. This is a building where they held the musical performances, as I recall, right, Jerry? And this was their museum. At one time it had been a depot, and then it's been converted into a museum and a genealogical research center. Doesn't it just crawl out to you? Oh, yeah. It's an attractive looking place. And this is their city hall. It was a factory building at one time that they converted into a city hall use. And you'll see a window here. You see a window here, And you see some windmills here with my good wife inspecting the foundation to make sure it was not going to fall over. There were 3 major windmill factories in Batavia, Illinois. And the informal title of the community is Windmill Capital of the World. And it's because of all these manufacturers, and all these interesting windmills that they have preserved, and they are part of the areas that are along the Fox River. And here's downtown Batavia, Illinois. My dentist must be located somewhere in one of these buildings that I went to many, many years ago. And I think we're at the end of, oh, I forgot, there's always a cemetery. Here we are. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to Batavia, Wisconsin. It's located in the southwest of Wisconsin, southwest of Sheboygan specifically. It's another unincorporated community. And it's in Scott Township of Sheboygan County. Where did they get their name? And they're pretty sure they know. They said that early settlers from Western New York, from around Batavia, were their first settlers. Again, if you know the history of the United States, you know that there was a lot of people who settled in the East, including, for example, around here, who then after a while got the itch to move on, and they moved west. And when you go to Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio, you find a lot of communities that have the same names as we do. It's because a lot of the people came from communities here, and when they moved west, took the name with them. So here's an example. Batavia, Wisconsin gets its name from us because the people who were from around here immigrated to that part of Wisconsin. Now, it sounds like it was really growing concern at one time. So let me tell you all of the places that existed there in 1900. Besides the homes, there were 2 dry goods stores. There was a furniture store, a hardware store, a carriage and wagon factory, a hotel, a dance hall, 2 blacksmith shops, a tin shop, a boot and shoe store, 2 churches, 2 schools, a sawmill, a grist mill, a cheese factory. There was an undertaker and a seamstress. There was a cigar factory, an ice house, and a butcher shop. Wow. What a growing operation that was, huh? Guess what? They're almost all gone. Also gone. The story of so many Batavia seems to be they rise up, they become really active, busy, and aggressive places, and then they go downhill. And here's an example. So here's a sign that welcomes you to Batavia in Wisconsin. And you say, wow, this must be quite the place. The sign sure gives that suggestion. But here it is. This is the main street. There's one street and 2 or 3 streets that run off and perpendiculars to Main, and that's what's here now. So this was probably one of the shops that could have been a blacksmith shop or something else like that. This home, which is a kind of a decent place, was the community's doctor, long deceased. But there's some nice houses here that are currently being used by current occupants, like this one. But now getting back to what's on the main drag, here we are. You can see that these are not growing concerns any longer. When we got there, this was the former school. There were 2 schools originally, then it went down to 1, and this one had just been closed. So we're still going even further downhill than it had already gone. Here's a church in the community, and that's done. So we'll move on to Batavia, Iowa. Batavia, Iowa has a kind of a connection to my wife's past, in that when we were first married, we lived in Iowa City, Iowa, because I was going to the University of Iowa. And so it's kind of a warm spot. A few here, and you too?
Did I miss the picture of the cemetery?
Oh, you did, because there wasn't one. Thanks for asking.
Nobody cared.
I guess people left before they died. So anyway, I'm a warm spot in my being for Iowa. Batavia, Iowa was founded in 1846. Its name was not Batavia originally, just as with Batavia in Illinois. This had a different name at the beginning. It was named Creasville. Now, why is that? And it's because it was laid out in 1846 by William McKee, Henry Crease, and Elijah O'Bannon. Now, I have a feeling that Mr. Crease must have been a fairly significant person in that place at that time, that they would name the community after him. So it became Creasville. So 1853, and its name got changed. Now, it wasn't by the postmaster this time. It was by state legislation. And the specifics are that a man by the name of William Hambrick came to Creasville, and he said to the local people, I think maybe we should change the name of this community. And without any objections, they said, okay, what do you suggest? And he says, Batavia. Now, I visited people in Batavia, Iowa. I said, how did you get your name? They said, well, it's because William Hambrick came to town and he convinced everybody we should change our name. And he suggested Batavia, and we found it sounded nice. So they went to the state legislature in Iowa. The state legislature changed its name for them. Now we know that after a while, Mr. Hambrick left this community and he went further west in the state. And when we went digging around for records on this man's personal history, we found that he was eventually living in the western part of Iowa, and he was listed as being an immigrant from Germany. Did we learn much more about it? That was pretty much it, wasn't it? Yeah. My wife is very good at researching these things because she used to run a genealogical research business. She knows how to do this sort of stuff way beyond my own capacity. So we know he moved to western Iowa, and he was from Germany, but that's all we know. Now, my speculation as to why he recommended Batavia is this. He may have come from a community in Germany called Passau, P-A-S-S-A-U, and my German pronunciation there may not be quite perfect, but we'll call it Passau. Is that okay? Is that agreed? And Passau was once called Batavia. And it got its name from a Germanic tribe called the Batavias. And the Batavias not only lived in this part of what is now Germany, but they also lived in part of what is now the Netherlands. And in fact, the Netherlands, for a period of time, from just before 1800 until about 1810, called itself Batavia. And in fact, the reason why we are called Batavia here is that when our community was being laid out, some people said, well, what are we going to call it? Why don't we name it after who's the guy who surveyed the Holland Bridges? Yeah, that's right, Joseph Ellicott. Why don't we name it Ellicottville? And Ellicott, not being all that concerned about his legacy, I suppose, said, no, don't name it after me. We should name it something else. And as they discussed it, they finally decided, given the fact that the Holland Land purchase was made by the Holland Land Company, which was composed of bankers from the Netherlands, which at that time was called Batavia. Why don't we call it Batavia in honor of the bankers in the Holland Land Company that purchased all this land of which we are a part. So, Batavias have a history. It extends to Germany, where Passau was once called Batavia. It extends to the Netherlands, where it once was referred to as a country called Batavia. So my guess is that this guy immigrated from Passau, Germany. He knew his history included it being called Batavia one time. He liked the name, so when he moved to Creasville in Iowa, he said to them, I think a better name would be Batavia. What do you think? I said, yeah. It'd be nice to know what the dynamics in that community were at the time. You wonder if Crease was a guy who would fall out of favor. They named it after him originally. Now they give up his name and they go with another one that's a completely foreign name. Was he a guy who turned out to be a crook? Was he a guy who turned out to be a philanderer? And what was it that caused them to give up their name? Something did, and it came from this William Hambrick. Okay, it was incorporated as a city in 1868, which is kind of amusing because it's nowhere being what you and I would think of as being a city. It's not big enough. But it's got a mayor, it's got 5 councilmen, and let's see what else it has. So this is their welcome. You see they established themselves in 1853, they say here, because that's when they got their current name. This is their city hall. I went into City Hall, of course, and I said, hi, I'm an ambassador from Batavia, New York. I'm here to greet you during our tidings, and I want to learn all I can about you. Well, it turned out that they had had a celebration many years earlier, probably in 1953, I'm guessing. And they had a yearbook they put together about their history, and they had one copy left. And the city clerk said to me, you can have this if you would like it. I said, I would love it. So, it's in my office here in our Batavia. And it's where the history involving Hambrick is recorded. Here's the main drag. You can see the grass growing in the street. This has fallen in hard times too. There's the railroad that passes through. And it's a farming community, so the building here reflects that fact. And the community center, there it is.
What's the blue?
Blue is parking space, yeah. It's reserved parking space for disabled people. See the sign over there? And here's the public library. All these buildings are kind of temporary, don't they? And they have a baseball team, the Batavia Dodgers. And this is a typical house. Notice how the paint's peeling. You get the feeling this is not a very prosperous place. But it's a city, I'm proud to say. And they've got a water tower with a name up on it to prove it. All right, so let's move on.
Jeez.
Batavia, Arkansas. Batavia, Arkansas is located in the north central Arkansas area of the Ozark Mountains. It's not very far from the community where, what's our town's largest store?
Oh, the Walmart.
Yeah, where Walmart came from, founder of Walmart. Lives nearby, not in Batavia, Arkansas, but it's not terribly far away. It was once an incorporated community. But, guess what? Not anymore. How did it get its name? Well, they do make a claim for that. It's fairly specific. They were named by Roswell Underwood. Who do you suppose Roswell Underwood was? He was their first postmaster.
They had a lot of power.
Postmasters have a lot of power, apparently. Yeah, at least they used to. So in 1880, when they got the post office, he said, okay, we're going to call this place Batavia, Arkansas. Now, besides the post office, it once had several stores, more than one hotel, a canning factory, a train depot, a stockyard, mills including a corn grist mill, blacksmith shop, a school, and several churches. Today, all of that is gone except for some of the houses and 3 churches and a small repair business store, business operation. Passenger train service ended in 1926, and the post office closed in 1955. But as you approach the community, they do have a sign, and you know that here is the unincorporated hamlet of Batavia, Arkansas. This is the main road through Batavia, Arkansas. Here's a prosperous-looking church there. Here's a business that apparently have recently gone out of business. It's called Batavia Express. A gas, grocery store, deli, pizza shop. And if you dial that number, the operator would say, this number is out of service. But here was a typical home. They were decent looking homes. Another one. We're back to a cemetery. This is their cemetery outside of town. Wow. Looks like it hasn't been too much action there for a while either. Notice how the wall is constructed down, some of the tombstones is falling apart. So that's Arkansas's Batavia. Now when we went to visit Batavia, Montana, we took Amtrak out. Took Amtrak to Chicago, changed trains, and got a sleeper car, flew overnight to visit Batavia, Montana. Now, Batavia, Montana is very close to a national park, Glacier National Park. And Glacier National Park is in view from Batavia, Montana's location. Now when I got there, I did what I always do, went to try to find local information. So I went to the library and I said, I want to find out what you have about Batavia, Montana. And the librarian looked at me and said, where? What? Where? I said, Batavia, Montana. No idea what you're talking about. We went to another building, I think it was a history building, and I said to the receptionist, I want to learn about Batavia, Montana. Gee, I don't know. I said, it's only 5 miles down the road according to the maps. Never heard of it, but there's a guy down in the basement, some guy down in the basement who might know, she said. So we went to the basement, found the guy, and I said, hi, I'm from Batavia, New York. I'm the roving ambassador for tidings from Batavia, New York. I want to find out about Batavia, Montana. He said, yeah, I think I know a little bit about it. It's west of town or southwest of town, I think. And I think there's a school there, which we later learned had been called Batavia School, but was no longer called Batavia School. He said that's about all I know. So we went out looking for Batavia, Montana. Now it turns out it's an unincorporated location again. It's a CDP, which stands for Census Designated Place. So if you look at the census map, Batavia, Montana is on the map. A Census Designated Place is a closely settled, unincorporated community. And that's what this was. So we wandered around, and we learned that there were only about 580 people living there. But when I looked at their ages, as reported in the census data, it's a very young community. compared to us, for example, and compared to most of the other Batavias. Here's the main road through Batavia, Montana. And alongside the road was a bicycle path, which is here. And located in Batavia is the Batavia waterfowl production area. Now that is an area that is about 34 acres of upland and 170 acres of wetlands and marsh. And it's essentially a breeding space for our waterfowl. Now, all the people who drive by this sign, which is next to that road I showed you a couple pictures back, I would think I've said to themselves, Batavia waterfowl production area. Batavia, why is this called Batavia? Because it's a census designated place on the census map. It had a school, which, as I mentioned earlier, was once called Batavia School, but no longer is. Here it is. It has a gas station and a convenience store. There it is. Has a farm implement business, as you see here. And it has a street called Batavia Lane. When you think, when people saw Batavia Lane, they'd say to themselves, Batavia Lane, Batavia. There's a connection to this place somehow. And then as they drove up Batavia Lane, they would find this business, Batavia Self-Storage and Truck Rental. Where did they get their name, I wonder? All right, here's the side street. Very rural, as you see. And I made this picture because this house is such an unusual structure. Almost a medieval appearance. So that's Batavia, Montana. An unincorporated, closely located collection of buildings. That's the census people know about, and the local people apparently don't. But as I thought about it afterwards, this is about the only Batavia that exists that does not have a sign on the edge of town saying Batavia. So when people drive down that main road, they didn't see a sign saying you are now in Batavia, or you're now in Byron, you're now in East Pembroke, etc. So our next location, and our last, is Batavia, California. Batavia, California is in the north central part of the state. It's in Solano County. It's about midway between San Francisco and Sacramento. It too is an unincorporated hamlet. Get the picture here? A lot of Batavias are unincorporated, or once incorporated, and now no longer are. And most of them are falling apart, unfortunately. And here's another example of that. The current population is less than 100 people. Here's the only street in Batavia, California. We're at a river crossing, which at one time was called Duke's Crossing. Maybe a man by the name of Duke lived there, I don't know. We speculate. And then the railroad, at some point, decided to rename the depot there, and they changed the name of the depot from Duke's Crossing to Batavia. Now, where they got the Batavia name, there's not a clue. Not a clue. This was once a thriving grain-producing area, and this was a grain shipping community. There were storage buildings that were constructed there in the 1800s. They were storing grain before it was loaded on trains. The man who was the primary mover at that time was a fellow by the name of George Manchester Coulter. And he built a house, which you can see shortly. So that's the reason for existing, is a place to ship grain from. As you move up the street, you find that all the houses are on one side of the street only. Which is the worst side. And this is the house that had been owned by George Manchester Kugler, who built the grain storage buildings and was the main shaker and doer, it appears, back in the 1800s. Now, when I went to the county historian's office, was that in the library? I almost think that was in the
I
library.
don't remember that one.
Yeah. You don't? Oh, so I can make this up, right?
Yeah, you can make up whatever you want to say. Yeah.
What I found was some early history. Wow. Smallest community, it's named Batavia, and they don't know where their name came from, but the county historian's office has some information about that history. And I found there a map that had been created in 1868 that was a plan for what the community was going to look like as it grew. The community was going to be 20 blocks in size. There were going to be 286 building lots on those. There were going to be 10 streets, each 60 feet wide, and 20-foot wide alleys. We never got beyond one street. But that was the plan in 1868. So now we've been through all of the Batavias, and as frequently is the case, you discover who they are because they do have a street name after them, Batavia Road, but that's about it. So that's all, folks. If I could do Walt Disney, yeah, that's it. That's it. And that's all, folks.
All right, good.
Now, you're supposed to have some questions for me, I understand. Yeah.
Is any one of the cities really stand out to the two, besides mass population, but anything really, besides Illinois, Iowa?
Well, Illinois is by far the most impressive community by that name. We're the next most impressive. But there's so much money in Batavia, Illinois, that we have no chance of coming in close to them because they can throw cash here and throw cash there and build these wonderful waterfront structures.
That's so
Yeah, it's really great. Yes?
Yeah, what about Batavia's outside of the U.S.? Will that be your next project?
That requires flying. We're going by ship, and my wife assures me that we're not going to fly or go by ship.
I guess.
You know, there was the Dutch West Indies, which became Indonesia, which has now yet another name. What's it called now? Anybody know?
Jakarta.
No. The Dutch West Indies. Anyway, but they now.
Isn't Batavia, Illinois, the headquarters for Aldi's products? If you look on things that are bought at Aldi's, it says, thank you, it says made, produced in Batavia, Illinois.
I didn't know that. Wow. Let me follow up on that question about the Dutch and East Indies. So there was a community there, and called Dutch. This area of the world is called Dutch and East Indies, or it was because the Dutch, like other Europeans, had claimed it for their own and gave it their name. And then they had a community which was called Batavia there. There was also a famous sailing ship that was from the Netherlands. It was called Batavia, and it sank on its maiden voyage when the crew mutinied. Had mutiny. Yeah. So Batavia, Illinois has, I think, lots of things, and I didn't realize that Aldi was one of them. Thanks for telling me.
More
What was the
research.
population again of Batavia, Illinois?
I'm sorry.
What was the population of Batavia?
26,000 and some.
So way bigger than us.
Yeah, we're about 15,000 and some.
Wow.
Yeah. Other questions?
Is there any Batavias in Canada that you could drive across the over?
They want you to leave.
Maybe in a foreign country.
Yeah, we're in Mexico.
I don't know the Mexican.
No, I don't know if there are. I'm not sure if there are.
Good question, Reggie. We'll have to check that out.
There you go. Cross the border and now have to fly.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you again, Larry, for teaching us about the rest of Batavias in the United States. I want to thank everybody again for coming out this morning and filling up the place. A few PSAs. We have some upcoming events that you might be interested in. Our next guest speaker is May 10th. Derek Pratt from the Erie Canal Museum in Syracuse is coming to talk about the competition between Black Rock and Buffalo for the western terminus of the canal. There are some connections back here at Batavia to that. And then the following night, May 11th, we are having our next trivia night on Sherlock Holmes, but it's going to be at Go Art. So you can join us over there, and the tavern and everything will be open, so you can also get a drink if you like. And then we have another concert coming up this month. Don Dwyer will be doing it on Civil War music on Friday, May 19th. And then the next Java with Joe, it'll be a little bit different because we'll be doing it at 2 in the afternoon. So it'll be afternoon coffee, not morning coffee. But and it'll be David Riley, who just wrote a book called Small Town Talk about his time growing up here in Batavia in the 50s and 60s. So if you're interested in that, it will be a different time. So don't show up at 9 o'clock because I won't have anything ready for you yet. But it'll be at 2 o'clock and it'll be same format. So, and for anyone who is not a member, the best way to stay informed is to become a member, and also is the best way to support what we do here. So, thank you all, and have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.